This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. Today, I'm your host, Kara Szymborski, filling in for Mike Rapin. And I am joined by two silly detectives in bowler hats. Welcome, Brian Murray and Nick White.
Ahoy, hoy.
Hey.
So, it's been a long and crazy summer. We've been taking a few weeks off. I would say enjoying life and existence and everything, but by that I of course mean being completely obsessed with the Barbie movie. At least that's been my summer so far. But we're gonna get into some things, talk about some comics. I'm really excited that I got to choose the topic for today, and I'm gonna make you guys talk about Tintin, one of the most famous Franco-Belgian comic series and one of the few that's widely available in the English language. But before we get into it, how have you been? How have comic books been? How has your summer been? Let's start with you, Brian.
I've been pretty good. Just trying to stay cool in the temperature sense. I have never and never will be cool in the good to be around sense. But
the self-esteem meter is starting in the poor section today. Apparently, we're
starting the show strong.
we're heading towards good, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, definitely don't go say nice things about me in the Discord. I'd hate that. I did get a comic I've been looking forward to for a long time, though. I found out about this comic back in like January or something, but it finally came out back in June, and that is Starfinder, Angels of the Drift. The first issue of that came out. This is written by James L. Sutter with art by Edu Mena. The pitch from the Paizo, which is the publisher of the Starfinder game, their website pitch is: a bold crew of adventurers must race to an isolated world to stop a catastrophic war for faster than light technology. And I love a high stakes space romp. It's hitting all the Star Wars switches in my brain and just triggering that same serotonin flow. But this book really like captured the same feel I get when I'm playing the game of like, this is a wide arcing space fantasy, like science fiction fantasy mashup. You've got, talking rat people, talking dragon people, sentient robots, and this is all in the first 15 pages.
I'm sorry, like the moment you're like, it really captures the spirit of the game, I was like, oh, are there like 5 pages where you're arguing whether or not it's slashing damage? It's like, okay. It's just a whole book.
Yeah, now the section where we had to figure out the grappling rules, that was a little weird, but
God.
Is Starfinder that game that was like so popular in Korea that it was like obliterating people's like social lives or whatever? Am I mixing that up?
That is StarCraft.
Oh, different Star game. Okay, what's this one? Tell me about this one, Brian.
This is so Paizo is a TTRPG tabletop role playing game publishing company, basically in competition with Wizards of the Coast. Wizards does D&D, Paizo does Pathfinder, and now Starfinder as of 6 years ago. It still feels like it just came out to me, but it's been 6 years.
So this isn't a video game. This is a game that physically exists on your tabletop?
Yeah, this is your standard Nerds and Dice tabletop game.
I was going to say, we're like another level deep on nerddom here. Like coming right out of the gate. What did you do this summer? Well, I hit a new level of nerdiness. What's up?
Yeah. As you should have come to expect from me by now.
As you record from your actual basement. Thanks for that, Brian.
Now, Brian, have you read the Pathfinder comics as well, or not? Or is that something you want to, or you have no interest in, or?
I haven't. I've definitely bought a bunch of them. I got like a Humble bundle not that long ago that had a bunch of Pathfinder comics in it. It might have been that long ago. I don't remember when it was.
So, Brian, is this Starfinder comic a comic that, for example, I would be able to read not knowing anything about the game?
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't have the same experience that I did of going like, oh, hey, I know that species. Oh, hey, I know that god that they mentioned. But I think it could still be a fun science fantasy romp.
Okay. I'm down for a romp, So,
we love a romp here at I Read Comic Books.
It's just fun to see Paizo just continuing to pump stuff out and try to capitalize on the gosh, how long has it been now? 4 or 5 months since Wizards of the Coast was threatening to pack up their toys and leave the playground.
Yeah, since whatever Wizards' most recent cock up was.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure there will have been another one in the last 6 months, regardless of when you listen to this episode.
Yeah, basically, for those unaware, the maximum TLDR is Wizards of the Coast basically was like, hey, what if we found a way to make more money by exploiting our user base? And then all of the other competitors of Wizards were like, we're going to take this opportunity and just try to capitalize. Because Brian, isn't Dungeons and Dragons roughly like 89% of the TTRPG market? I'm sure the percentage isn't completely right, but
I
it's
thought you were going to
close.
start talking about the
Yeah,
Dungeons and Dragons movie. It's like,
Oh, we
wait.
could. We could.
No,
It
not
was
yet. I
good.
haven't
Hey,
seen it yet. I
we'll
haven't
just
seen it
say
yet.
that. Hey, haven't seen the movie? Probably should go see the movie.
Okay.
It's
It's
a good movie.
on Paramount Plus if you have Paramount Plus. So
I do have Paramount Plus.
there you go.
I could do that.
Problem solved.
I have almost exclusively been using it to rewatch The Fairly Odd Parents. So I don't know.
Okay, this is bordering on oversharing now, but that's okay. No, it's fine.
That show is terrific. Are you kidding me? The episodes about the Crimson Chin speak to my nerdy superhero heart. Anyways,
Nick, how have you been?
Yeah,
What have you been reading?
Nick, what romp have you been going on this summer?
Yeah. Oh man. So the wild and crazy romp would be my air conditioning breaking last week.
No.
And it was a couple days of, is the AC broken? Is it really broken? Is the temperature broken? Is the machine broken? What's broken? I'm hot. I'm
I broken?
physically hot. Physically, like, feeling hot, the sensation of feeling hot, not like aesthetic self-esteem. We're going back into self-esteem issues again, clearly.
Those too many clarifiers, Nick.
Yeah. And it turns out that some little critter got in and gnawed the cords that go to the refrigerant.
Okay.
I don't know. Anybody who like does anything with like mechanics or electronics could be like, yeah, the regulator's broken, and I would be like, sure, you can say whatever you want to say. I will agree, because you have like grease on your hands and you're wearing gloves and you have a tough mustache and you're the authority figure here. I am just this idiot that lives in these four walls and understands none of it. And so that had to get replaced. And then it was a question of, he was like, and this is like the worst thing any mechanic can tell you as they leave. This is like the worst thing, is when they go, so that should do it. Let me know if it doesn't. And you're like, oh God, what does he mean by that? And then they tip their hat and get in the car and just smirk as they drive away. And so yesterday, it almost turned into like the old days of ye old science experiments when you were a kid. It's like, oh, will the plant grow if I give it more water? Except for me, it was, hey, is the fact that I have this really bright lamp next to the thermostat, is that fucking things up? Because it turns out it was. I thought that was like an old wives' tale about bright lamps fucking up thermostats. Apparently,
It adds
it's
heat.
real.
It adds heat. You're generating heat.
Yeah.
That's not
So
an old wives'
apparently-
tale. That's just literal science.
Yeah, I can't distinguish between the two. We already discussed the fact that I have a very loose understanding of anything else in this home. But yeah, it turned out that was also fucking things up and making the AC stay on way longer than it should be anyway. I learned a lot this weekend. All of it I probably should have picked up in third grade. Yeah. Beyond that, I did get some reading done, which is something I feel like I sort of have a handle on amidst all these other things.
Splendid.
And I read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, Lost Years #1. A lot of credits on this book. Writing by Kevin Eastman and Tom Waltz. Colors by Luis Antonio Delgado. Letters by Sean Lee. In the past sequences, the pencils were by S.L. Gallant and the inks were by Maria Keene. In the modern sequences of the book, it was pencils and inks by Ben Bishop, and in the Splinters Journal parts of the book, I know it's a lot, pencils and inks by Kevin Eastman. So for those unaware, this is basically a follow-up to IDW's prestige 5-part miniseries called The Last Ronin, which was based on an unused idea that Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird concocted back when the Turtles were at Mirage, which is why that book has the unique situation of having a Peter Laird co-credit on it, because you don't really find those anymore because Eastman and Laird really don't like each other to whatever degree you think is the
Wait, they
case.
don't?
Oh, not
Nick, I
anymore. Oh,
didn't know
no.
this.
No.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Wait.
I don't know if this is sarcasm at this point.
No,
I think you're
I
joking with me.
genuinely did not know this. Turtle
Oh,
gossip. Let's go.
no. They're like, if you want to have a real fun time, go read the I think it's the black and white classics, or it's the color it's either the reprinting of the black
The
and white
original stuff.
version or the color classics where they recolored the originals.
Okay.
Either one has like a back and forth for every issue where it's like Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman like discussing the issue that, before each issue there's sort of like a preface and they kind of
Okay.
discuss it. And like most of the time Kevin Eastman is like, yeah, I really enjoyed this issue. It was a really fun time. And then Peter Laird is like, yeah, Kevin missed all of his deadlines on this issue and generally turned in
No.
everything late and kind of made things hell. And it was sort of about 3 issues later that I decided I didn't want to work with him ever again.
Wait,
Haha.
wait. This is all like included in the books?
It's in the book. Yeah, it's so good. It's
incredible. I want to
it's-
go read Petty Comic Gossip.
it's it's amazing. And anyway, they like really don't like each other anymore.
Oh my God.
And
I'm just
it's
thrilled
so,
for once to not have it involve allegations of some kind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like a general old-fashioned, yeah, this dude is a dick.
Yeah, classic, just artist beef.
Oh my
It's-
God. That's incredible.
It's amazing. I'll
Thank you,
figure
Nick.
out which one it is and I'll send it to you because
Yes, please.
the fact that some editor was like, I'm including this. It's just amazing.
And to think it all started with one satirical one-off comic issue back in the 80s to make fun
Yeah.
of Daredevil, and here we
And
are.
I was going to say, and to think Frank Miller is ultimately at the heart of all of this. So
Oh my
one
God.
controversial figure deserves another. But yeah, so there was this series that launched in October 2020 and wrapped its 5th issue in April of 2022. So yes, it was one of those very long publishing things. It's really good, but I waited to read it till the end because I was worried it was going to be like super grimdark. Because it's like, oh, it's the last Ronin, and of course the big premise was like, oh, there's only one Ninja Turtle left, and like what happened to the rest? And I was just really
That's very
concerned
dark.
that it was. Yeah, and I was like, is this the book where they're like, hey, this is where the turtles can say fuck? And I don't know, they're like freebasing cocaine off of Splinter's walking stick and
What?
God knows what else. No,
Nick, they're teenagers. They're Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, not by this point.
I want to clarify it. Like they're old now. They're all grown up.
wait.
But and these things aren't actually happening, Kara. This is my concern of what would happen in the book.
Okay.
Thankfully, it didn't.
Okay.
It's really good. That was really good. I was so excited when I finished it. When we did our IRCB like picks of the year, it was my pick for I think 2022. Really great book, super ambitious, totally endorse it. And then they're like, "Oh, we're going to do a sequel." And then just imagine me as the Leo DiCaprio meme where he's angrily pointing at the TV and I was like, "This is where they fuck it up. How could you do this?" This was like lightning in a bottle. You can't get lightning in a bottle twice. It's not going to happen.
I always thought of that Leonardo DiCaprio meme as like you recognize
Recognition.
yourself in something. So that's adding a different layer to your reaction to
Look,
this
we
comic
already
book,
proved
Nick.
that I don't know how modern HVAC systems work and also just the basic understanding of heat. So the idea that I'm not interpreting memes is
I enjoy that you pick up on the anger. Like you could be, I see myself and I'm angry
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Point at the screen.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's because Nick has already written this fan fiction. So.
Yeah. Go check out my what is it? AO3.
Oh, is it still down? Didn't like the
Oh, no,
Russian
it's been
hackers
back
got
for a
at
while.
it? Oh, good. Okay.
Anyway, I don't want to discuss The Last Ronin that much at all because I don't want to spoil it. And I don't want to discuss Lost Years because, and this seems very obvious, but I'll say it, do not read Lost Years. None of it. Don't read any of it if you haven't read Last Ronin because it completely builds and it ruins the end of Last Ronin. But both don't suck. Both are really good. They just announced a video game coming out on this. I think they just announced a cartoon coming out about this. They also announced The Last Ronin 2 that's going to be followed up. They announced that at SDCC. Someone's going to let me down eventually. No, that's not something I need to unpack in therapy. And what about you, Kara? What have you been reading? What other basic understandings of light and heat and everything else have you acquired within the last week?
But first, deprecate yourself, because that's what we do here.
Right. First, show us all of your human foibles, please.
Oh, I got that, no problem. Hey guys, thanks for being here today. I just came off of a like the biggest work trip I'm gonna have all year. So my brain is a puddle. I slept so hard last night that I had dreams in which I was tired and was trying to wake up and couldn't. Have you been so tired that you dream about being tired? Like you dream about sleeping? I was like 3 layers deep in Inception, all right? That's where I was last night, trying to like recuperate my brain and my body from, being in the basement of a convention center. And let me tell you, I was actually in the basement of the convention center that was gearing up to host the Otakon, the largest anime convention on the East Coast. So if you were at Otakon, we were in the same building. What's up? I probably saw you if you were wearing a costume. And I was at a wildly different event where there were maybe 2 other nerds there with me, and then just a bunch of professionals trying to like network and do their jobs. And all of a sudden, we're surrounded by people in costumes, and I and the other nerds were thriving. But everyone else on my floor was just like, wait, what is happening? What is happening? And I had found this Otakon website like 6 months ago and been like, guys, have you been to a comic convention? Have you been to an anime convention? I had to explain furries to my boss, okay? Like that's the kind of week I had. So um that's where I'm at. Obviously, I have been thriving off of the existence of the Barbie movie, and I want everyone to see it. And to anyone who's getting inundated with the messaging that it's anti-man, I would say that it's anti inequality and pro being able to be whatever you want to be while recognizing that life has a lot of constraints. I had a lot of feelings going into and out of that movie. Also, it's funny. And Ryan Gosling's delightful, even though he's a terrifying almost incel at certain points. But anyway, comic book wise, I read a book that's been on my list for a while. I can't remember if I've talked about it previously, but I feel like it has been mentioned on the show. It's Mimosa by Archie Bongiovanni. And it's a graphic novel that is about 4 queer friends, kind of like in their 30s, like mid to late 30s. I was laughing because Hoopla had it categorized as a teen book, but the very first page is one of the characters' vibrators running out of juice. So I was like, for teens, you decide.
Only for teen can hang.
So, it was. I think a teenager who like could read this, but I think somebody who's in their later 20s or in their 30s or 40s would get more out of it emotionally, because it is the story of these 4 different characters navigating their friendships at a point when they're changing. Like this group of friends has been friends for 10 years now. They've seen each other through like different life changes, whether it's transitioning or getting top surgery, or one of them got married and had a kid and then got divorced and came out as genderqueer. There's all this stuff going on. But the book, what I liked about the book is that it's not really focusing on like all these changes that have happened in the past. We see those more as like flashbacks to underscore the changes that are happening in the current narrative, where these characters are realizing that just because somebody has been your friend for a long time doesn't mean they need to continue being their friend, especially if they're not treating you in the way that you want to be treated. So it's just, it was so messy. It's been like a while since I've read something where everyone's a hot mess and like still loves each other, but still can recognize that like things can change. The inciting action in this book, that's like the plot that we're following, is these characters are talking about how there's no like good like queer spaces to meet people once you're past the age of like 25, because all of the support in their area is for like teenagers or kids in college or right out of college. And real life segue, that's kind of like how it is in my area right now. Like I just moved to this area. I think it's hard when you're an adult to make friends in general, let alone find a community to be a part of. So I think regardless of if you're queer or not, if you've been in a situation where you're like, wait a minute, I'm an adult and my friends are off doing their own thing and I don't know how to make new friends and I don't know where I belong and maybe I moved it. There's a lot of that in here. Your mileage may vary on how many of those feelings you want to feel, but if you want to feel them, you could read this book. Like they go into like how hard it is to find somebody to date. They're trying to help each other. They're imperfect. I really thrived on how imperfect these characters are. And I'm really glad that we're kind of at a place in like certain parts of comic book publishing, at least, where there are so many queer narratives available now that not everything has to be like perfect and like a happy ending and like good representatives of the community. It's like, no, like these people are deeply flawed and making mistakes, but you can still see like their value as people through it. And it was just like a lot more nuance that I was expecting, that I really, really enjoyed. Loved the dialogue, loved the shitty, messy characters. The art style in this book was not my favorite. It was more of like I guess a sketchy indie style, like something that you'd have found on a webcomic like 10 years ago, but it worked for the vibe of the story. So I'm not like mad about it. It's just if this was a different type of story, the art style would not um, jibe with me. And that there were some, like, it's not all just people being a mess. Like, it is a funny, heartwarming book. And I did laugh out loud at a punchline about Portland because my brother's lived there for like 10 years now. And I was like, it's true. But yeah, basically, highly recommend. And now I want mimosas. But I always want mimosas. So I don't know how this is any different than that.
If you do want to make friends as an adult, I can recommend joining a comic book podcast.
Oh, yeah. No, that is.
All of my adult friends have been made right here on this show.
I have explained that to people. They're just like, well, who are your friends as an adult? And I was like, well, I've got some friends in California. I still have some friends in the New York area. I've got a bunch of friends in Michigan. They're like, oh, great. When have you last seen them? Never. No. Like,
yeah. C2E2 2019.
We hang out on the internet. We are known entities on the internet. We have a Discord. You should join. What's up to everyone listening live? Thank you for being here. But yeah, that was my little summer festivity reading experience. And I think to close us out with this portion of our show, Nick, you read another book, didn't you?
Yeah, and thematically, to wrap things up, I suppose it's quite perfect that that book was called Swan Songs #1. Uh, this is by W. Maxwell Prince, art by Martin Simmons, letters by good old Neon. Of course, Maxwell Prince, perhaps best known for Ice Cream Man, and Martin Simmons, perhaps best known for his art on Department of Truth. So, really great pairing here. Prince has had a history of just continuing to want to do anthology books. Obviously, Ice Cream Man is mostly anthology with some narrative through lines. You've got One Week in the Library. You've got Ha Ha, where the unifying theme was clowns. And that was not one I really wanted to read at the beginning, but it wasn't all creepy, and I can still endorse that one. But this is another sort of anthology series that Prince is doing at Image. And of course, as the title of the book suggests, the unifying theme this time is that it's all about the end of different things. And I had seen a promo image for the book a couple a couple weeks ago, or one of the issues, and it was like each cover or has a framing narrative where it goes the end of ... and the one I saw was the end of a marriage, and I was like, okay, Adam Driver punches some walls, that's fine, I can handle that. Where are we going next
Wow.
with this? And I haven't even seen the movie, I just know that it happens, it's fine. And I was like, all right, so what's the first issue? And it's like, oh, the end of the world. And I was like, oh, great, really, just a really low bar to kick things off on. That's great.
Very topical.
Yeah, right. And so it's got this sort of post-apocalyptic setting. You're following this guy named Brian. Sorry, Brian, you're getting roped into this now.
That's fine.
And obviously they show outside and all the streets are filled with garbage and the cars are on fire and people are protesting, etc., etc. Again, not that far removed from today. Brian's mom is sort of holed up, dying of kidney disease, and Brian is reading to her from Better Gardens magazine, just because it's something that they both sort of enjoy, and it's sort of peaceful and calming, and like, you do you figure out what works for you. If it's a garden magazine, that's great. They find out that there aren't any more issues left, and that the last issue is like some guy at the local pharmacy has it. And so Brian decides he's going to make the decision to go out into this world and get the last magazine. And yeah, it's pretty dark, but it's also kind of uplifting. Meanwhile, you have this constant like countdown, like the, what do they call that? The nuclear countdown or doomsday clock.
The
doomsday clock.
Yeah, you have this ominous
I
doomsday
read
clock.
Watchmen.
Yeah, exactly. And it starts at like 23 and it's in red and black, so it almost looks like a scary, nightmarish Michael Jordan jersey. Which
Okay.
is kind of like
All
a
right.
weird thing I noticed. I was like, was this intentional? Does this guy just hate the Bulls?
Shadow Realm Michael Jordan is here.
Yeah. But like most Maxwell print stuff, it's dark, it's very grounded in sort of the sort of scariness that comes with day-to-day existence. And if some of you out there are like, that's not me, that's fine, then you and I are on different pages. That's okay. But it's also got sort of some uplifting points. And I would just say, if you're looking for something different, you've read other Maxwell print stuff and you think that you're up for something else, just give this a try. If you're looking for pure escapism, this is not your read. This is definitely not your book at all.
Thanks for the honesty, Nick.
Yeah. If you want escapism, go pick up that new G. Willow Wilson Image fantasy book. That one's great. That's what I'd recommend.
Oh, maybe I will. Thank you.
Yeah.
It sounds delightful, just knowing the things that you said just now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's me. That's it. That's what I got.
Thanks, Nick. Well, we got some folks joining us in the Discord chat for our live listen every Sunday. Thanks, gang. We got some top picks for what are you reading next? What is the top of your pile? We got Danny reading X-Men 25. I have to assume Mike is also reading the same thing. And username Dom with the Lightold is going to do a Black Science read through. I read, I think, the first 2 trades of that and then dropped off, but I remember the art being, so good, so nice. So definitely support that one. Thank you. But let's get into what we're reading next. What's going on, Brian? What are you going to have on the top of your pile this week?
Well, like a lot of people, I saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and became enamored with Spider-Punk almost immediately. I was a little familiar with Hobie Brown before the movie came out, just from reading all the Spider-Verse stuff that came out way back when. I was just browsing through Hoopla, as one does, and found Spider-Punk Battle of the Band, BANNED. Written by...
Right out of the gate with a pun, huh? Right out of the gate.
I mean, it's a spider book, Nick. What do you want?
Brian, I got to tell you.
I don't know. I know so little about Spider-Man that you're like, oh, it's gonna be filled with puns, and I'm like, is that known?
I mean, I think so, because Peter Parker loves a good pun, or in the movies loves a good pun. Brian, I'm having deja vu because I also read this book recently, wanting to get more from the Spider-Verse movie, and I am deeply interested to know what the result is for you once you've read it, because I personally stopped halfway through the first issue of this trade. But your mileage may vary. You could very well go into this and be like, Kara's crazy. This is great. But I was like, this is a
Yeah, your
different
mileage may vary,
character.
Brian. If you make it past issue 1, you're the basic one.
We all know I'm the basic one here.
Oh, man.
This is written by Cody Ziegler with art by Justin Mason, colors by Jim Charalampidis, and letters by Travis Lanham. The premise of this is basically like, after Hobie Brown smashed his guitar into President Norman Osborn, he thought that the world would get better. I'm just like, really? That's generally it's like a systemic thing. It's usually not just like one guy, but there seem to have been consequences of some kind, and to that I would simply like to say, duh. Like, you don't concuss the president of the United States without the world changing in some way.
Wait, did he concuss the president or murder the president?
I don't know. I haven't read any of the stuff leading up to it.
Because I have to figure, like, if he like took the president off the chessboard, that's a power vacuum. That's a bigger problem, some might say.
Yeah. The book does not specify, and in comics, if I don't see a corpse, I assume they're still kicking around somewhere.
That's fair. Zombie version. Zombie President Osborn. I bet they've done that.
They used the word venomized in there, so I assume that there's a symbiote in play. And you never know what's going to go on with those slimy little fellas.
I enjoy how nonchalant you're being about all this. You're like, yeah, it's like an alternate universe, and Spider-Man hit the president with an electric guitar, and there's probably an alien latched onto him somehow. Anyways, I'm going to make some coffee and go to work.
That's Tuesday in the Spider-Verse.
I am also, top of my pile is a book that is kind of like a mismatch of fun media properties. I'm going to check out the He-Man Thundercats crossover. Zach recommended this in one of the chats maybe like a month or two ago. I gotta say, like, every part of my 8-year-old self is just screaming at my current age self, like, why haven't we read this already? I don't I don't know. I was a little young to experience He-Man on television, but I got the tail end of Thundercats, and I definitely had a children's book about He-Man. And I remember fondly the mustachioed character design of Man at Arms, and just the really toyetic character designs in general. Like, when you look at something from the 80s and you're like, this was designed to sell toys to children.
So every cartoon from like 81 to 87.
Well, yeah,
like the cartoons where you could actually see like the points of movement on the animation, and it's like, buy it.
Leave the GoBots out of this, Nick. So this is so it's the He-Man stuff, which is sort of an 80s update on the sword and sorcery genre for children. Our protagonist was Adam, a prince who had a sword where, when he said by the power of Grayskull, all of a sudden he'd get more muscles but retain every other physical characteristic. So very much a Clark Kent situation where it's like, oh man, with those glasses, I'd never imagine that you're Superman. And Thundercats, what's not to love about the Thundercats? They're cats, they're humans, they're human cats with great eye makeup and better hair, and
spawned a generation of furries.
Like, the furry. I was gonna say, did Thundercats end up in your furry discussion with your boss, or?
I just tried to not get fired. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would have just been like, it's costumes. They're costumes. That's it.
Don't worry, that's not an actual blue dog walking on its hind legs.
The ones that we saw were blue, actually. How'd you know? So
I know things, Kara. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to.
There was a poster for Otakon up in our event space, and that's why my coworkers could see rooms labeled things like Maid Cafe and Lolita Garden, and I had
Oh.
to just leap in when I heard one of the executives saying, "What's a Lolita Garden?" And I was like, "Do not Google that. Do not Google it. Do not put those words in your phone." Like, we're just not even no. Please don't. Anyway, so He-Man Thundercats, perfect summer vibes, 80s fever dream. I need no more explanation. It has a 4.5 out of 5 star rating on Hoopla, so I have to imagine that it's at least halfway decent and not just fueled by nostalgia. Anyway, Zach seemed to like it, so perhaps I'll like it too. That is the next top of my pile.
And if we don't, we're coming for your ass, Zach.
These are the perils of making recommendations.
Nick, what are you reading next?
So for me, it's The Sacrificers #1 by Rick Remender, art by Max Fiumara, colors by Dave McCaig, letters by Russ Wooten. Mainly, I wanted to pick this up just because I was a big fan of Rick Remender's A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, a book that anyone who listens to this show will note that I have probably given 8 or 9 different versions of that title mistakenly, but I just wanted to make sure I got it right this time. And so I thought to myself, I sort of owe it to Rick to see if he can actually deliver 2 titles in a row that I like, because in the past, that's never happened. Rick and I, not really on the best of terms for the most part. But of course,
Does
I
Rick
liked the
know
book.
that?
Yeah. Rick is deeply hurt by my thoughts. He, every waking minute is thought, gosh, I hope Nick likes this book. I know. I hope he does, because he's a real sick fuck, and he liked the one with the one guy murdering people who would break light bulbs and then poke the shards into people to torture them.
What?
So read A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance.
I don't know if
Okay,
I want to now.
it has some darker moments. I liked it. Mike liked it. I don't know if that
Brian's
is an
shaking his
endorsement.
head. I don't know about that.
He's like Nick liked it, Mike liked it. This is a clear stay away
Hard
sign.
pass.
Right, yeah. Like, Nick thinks this is a ringing endorsement with a second on it. It's not.
These are the guys who brought you the Ice Cream Man podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, but I read the first issue because we got a promotional copy for the show. And look, bottom line, you got Max Fiumara doing the art, and the guy was a fixture on several BPRD runs. Fantastic artist. He drew possibly the saddest Black Hammer title, which was Dr. Star in the Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows, or Dr. Andromeda eventually, because the title changed because there was, I think, a lawsuit. But Black Hammer is magnificently depressing to begin with. The fact that this guy drew the saddest one, I think, I don't know if they're going to give an Eisner out for that, but they probably should have.
Eisner
Anyway,
for saddest book.
Saddest book, right? Look, if you're looking for dark fantasy, you really should pick up this book. And all of those dumb dark fantasy fans that are a sucker for like several pages of an intro and then a beautifully drawn map of everything, like, it's there. It's got the wonderful map. There's really no exposition. It drops you right into the middle of this world where it's got like humanoid pigeons and a fiery god who eats lava cakes, and he has a snooping daughter who has like magma hair, and there's a bounty hunter that looks like the main character from the Overlord video games, and you're like, what is going on? But Rick doesn't care, because he's not going to fall into that trap of spending like 5 issues being like, let me go through a whole bunch of exposition and just set up my fantasy world. Like, no, he just fucking drops you in the middle of it. And like, let me just read the image solicit, because it is so hard to even try to address this book. And I think they were even like, I don't even have a fucking chance at doing this. So they say, in The Sacrificers, tomorrow is a harmonious paradise thanks to 5 families who make everything perfect for the price of 1 child per household. Now, as that bill comes due, a son expected to give everything for a family that never loved him, and an affluent daughter determined to destroy utopia must now unite to end one generation's unnaturally protracted reign. So basically, it's a real boilerplate epic fantasy narrative.
I was gonna say this is giving From Blood and Ash, which is one of the top selling like fantasy novel series right now. Like
That's
only,
Armentrout, right?
Yeah, I'm only at the start of book 2, but like this sounds like From Blood and Ash.
Well, they didn't mention that in the solicit, Kara, so
Okay.
clearly it can't be. No.
I guess sacrificing a firstborn is an older trope than just
Yeah,
5 years ago. So
that's a that's a that's a ongoing motif, you might say.
been there since the Bible or previously.
Yeah.
I'm very invested in the idea of overthrowing the aged autocracy.
I can't imagine why that would be relevant to our day and age, Brian.
Yeah. Why don't we have 30 seconds of awkward silence to drill that home?
Look, I just quietly chuckled when the big magma god walked into the room and like the little waiter was like, "Here are your lava cakes." And I was like, "Haha, this is stupid. This is funny." Like, this is like pages after this guy is like giving up his firstborn son and he's like, "I'm so sorry, son." And then I'm like, "Ooh, lava cakes. This is fun."
Delightful. An element of whimsy in an otherwise dark and
Yeah.
disturbing tome.
Yeah. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. I would at least say just check out issue 1 and see if it's for you.
Solid review. Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for sharing your top of your pile picks. We're going to take a quick break and then be right back to talk about your favorite Franco-Belgian comic character and mine, Tintin. This week on the I Read Comic Books podcast, we're talking about one of the most famous comic book characters in Western culture that I have learned not all Americans know about. It is the Tintin comic books. These are one of the most well-known Franco-Belgian comic book series, definitely of the 20th century, and I would argue into the 21st, since they just recently made a movie that Mike wanted us all to watch in conjunction with this show, but no, there's no need for that. We're here for comic books. So.
I couldn't find it streaming on any of the services that I have, and I wasn't going to pay money for it. So
Good for you. So what I chose this topic because I grew up reading the Tintin comics. My parents were really big about getting my brother and I lots of comic books to read when we were kids because they were just excited about us reading. And my dad loves French culture, and he had studied abroad in Belgium, so he made sure that we had lots of like Tintin and Asterix. And I've definitely talked about these briefly on the show before. And when I was at Comixology, was working with the team to get more Franco-Belgian comics available, sometimes in English, mostly in French, on that platform. So this is a place of origin for comic books that is really interesting to me on a lot of different levels. I think one of the most stark differences between French and Belgian comics versus American style comics is that in America, when you think of comic books, you are 9 times out of 10 going to think of superhero comics. And that is barely a genre in France and Belgium, but you'll find lots of other genres of comic books. And Tintin, I think, is squarely in the all ages adventure category. These stories were first published in, I want to say, the 30s. The first one was Tintin in the Congo, which is so racist that it has not been translated into English, and it should really stay that way. And you have to remember that this was a time period where Belgium was still not like coming out of being a colonial power or attempting to be a colonial power. So there's a lot of like colonist themes that you can see kind of creeping into the depiction of non-white characters in this series. The books are centered around the adventures of Tintin, our protagonist. He's a reporter. I think the creator Hergé intentionally made him look very young so that children reading the comics would have kind of an avatar within the stories to say, oh, I could be doing these things. This is where the Ligne Claire art style really, like when people talk about the Ligne Claire art style, it's generally Tintin that they're referencing, where if you look at the inking and the line work, there's not any like shading or hatching or anything. Like any color differentiation happens with the color, so everything's really, I think, visually appealing, and of course, it's going to appeal visually to children. So, how did I get Brian and Nick to read one of these books? We quickly realized that it is difficult to get a hold of Tintin comics if you don't have a library that has physical copies because the rights are a mess. So, what I did was scan one of my issues on my like computer printer and email it to them. So, don't try this at home, kids. But we did read Tintin, Red Rackham's Treasure, which is one of my favorite of the stories and one of the least racist ones, which is mostly because there are virtually no non-white characters in it, which is a whole other kettle of fish to unpack. But I've been talking for a while. What's up? What did you guys think?
From the one black character that we did see, the depiction bordered on minstrelry, so
Bordered on, squarely in the middle of.
Yeah, it was a full minstrel show looking character design. So I'm kind of glad that they decided to be racist by not including them instead of I don't know, being turbo hyper racist.
There's a reason Tintin in the Congo again has not been published in English.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to thank Kara right out of the gate. I mean, I've read a little Tintin, a couple volumes, but thank you for picking a largely unproblematic Tintin story, because it turns out when the majority of the plot is 5 or 6 white guys arguing on a boat at sea, that the chance that things can really go south fast, just that it's sort of taken off the table. I mean, thankfully. Because there's no opportunity for them to visit a real country or a real country's analogous counterpart and just watch things go south. Which is also what happened because I decided to read another one called Tintin in America.
Oh yes, Nick.
And I was very surprised because I was like, oh, like again, this is we're talking about stereotypes and then I go and make one, but here we are. Not to paint with a broad brush, but usually I find with a lot of these Franco-Belgian comics or European comics with like, oh, we're coming to America, right? It's like, it's always New York. It's always fucking New York. It's New York, New York, New York, whatever. And he goes to Chicago. And I was like, oh, what a pleasant surprise. And he's like, I'm going to fight the crime syndicate. And like Al Capone's in it. And I'm like, when was this written? And it's like 1931, which I think was like the year that Al Capone was like brought up on charges. And I'm like, I would not be writing a book about putting a real I mean, look, the Atlantic Ocean is between you.
Like, why does he care?
Yeah, exactly. You got the Atlantic Ocean between you, but like, I mean, still, I mean, if we did that in like the modern day, like some sort of version of this, I'm not so sure. Maybe I would be as bold as an author, but that was interesting. It got a Lake Michigan call out. That was nice. I learned that there's a disproportionate amount of businessmen in Chicago with hidden trapdoors in their offices. Interesting. And I was like, oh, this is largely funny. A lot of slapstick, a lot more slapstick than I really remembered. But also, again, Nick, it is a book for children. Please don't forget that. And then at one point, one of the gangsters escapes Chicago and he goes off and Tintin is like, I will follow him. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Where are you following him to? And he's like, I'm going to follow him to this area that he went, and it is a Native American reservation, except the term Native American is not used once.
Correct.
And other terms are frequently used, include one which was the a recent NFL team's mascot until recently. And so that gets used a lot, and the book goes pretty south from there.
Lots of headdresses and teepees and
and tomahawk throwing and all of the persistent stereotypes about Native Americans.
Yeah, it's like you're in 1930, like 1920s, 1930s gangland Chicago, and then you do an abrupt turn into like 1880s Wild West cowboys and Indians genre type.
Yeah,
like...
it's so like it's almost like he had like he like made a list of like things he wanted to do about America, and he like picked 2, and he's like, I gotta come up with this segue, and it's not a good one, but here we are. Like, these are the 2 stories I want to tell. Look, I want to be racist and I don't want to be racist, so we're gonna get the best of both worlds, and we're just gonna make it happen. So yeah.
Well, what?
It was an interesting time, and I will also mention this. You mentioned the rights being difficult to get a hold of, which is when I sort of decided to take a two birds with one stone approach. I was like, you know what, I do want to finally get around to reading Tintin, and I do need to get it for this show. So I ended up with a stupid I sent a boxed set to my house. So now I've got everything.
Yes.
Including, and I didn't want to actually this show, but I guess I'm gonna have to actually this show.
Is there an
The
English
first volume
Tintin
of
and Congo?
no. First off, they didn't include that,
Okay.
and I was like, okay. I was both like
A little
relieved.
disappointed, but
Yeah, exactly. It was like simultaneous, like, oh, thank God it's not here, but
Uh-huh.
also like people say this is terrible in the same way that people don't want to look away from a car crash. I was like, how terrible? Like,
It's
show me the receipts, but also it's bad.
yeah.
So
it's like when you're on Reddit and you know that a picture is like fully just human gore, but you're like,
yeah.
do I click on it though? Do I want to see just how bad it is?
Well, what
Just
else
like
did
a
you get?
YouTube video and it says it's hosted by Live Leaks on Reddit, and you're like, oh, this is not going to be good.
Well, okay, so dialing it back a little bit, Nick, what else is in the collection that you ordered?
Well, this is the interesting thing because I think you mentioned that the first volume of Tintin was the Congo book, but actually it's not. The first one is Tintin in the Land of the Soviets,
Oh,
which
that was
apparently
in black and
wasn't
white.
published
Yeah.
for like 40 years.
Yep.
It never got put in color. He claimed that the plates were so bad. Some people think he was lying and just partially was just embarrassed about the quality of
Oh.
the book, that they were so bad that he couldn't reproduce it. So then everyone was like, fine, we're just going to bootleg it. So they bootlegged it for a while, and then it finally got published 40 years later, but it never got recolored. And apparently a lot of him also not liking the book is because the author wanted, is it Hergé? I think is
Elche.
how
Yeah,
Wikipedia said to say it. Yeah.
it's his initials are J, but you pronounce them the French. He like made a portmanteau out of his own real initials, and so
Oh.
his writer's name was Elche.
Well, apparently he really wanted this first venture to be in America, but his editor at this newspaper, which was like a pretty fascist national state newspaper
Mm.
apparently at the time, was like, no, we need to instruct the youths on the evils of communism, so you were going to put the first story in the Soviet Union. And so basically the editor went over his head, and that's why the first book was that,
Okay. Okay.
apparently. So
Well,
yeah,
what else is in there? I've read most of them, I think.
I think it's everything. It's literally everything else except obviously the Congo story. I think that's the only one omitted, and then they do include the Soviet, the black and white Tintin in the Land of the Soviets, which a lot of collections don't have.
Is the not completed final book Tintin and the Elf art included?
I don't think so.
I can out
I
nerd
don't
you on
think
this,
that one
Nick.
was.
It's not a contest.
Well,
Fight.
I did read about that because apparently, like, his wife gave permission, but then decided to not give permission or whatever to have another person finish it or something like that.
You're just bringing all the comic book drama to the fore today, Nick.
Like, let me just say this, okay? Like, I went on Wikipedia because that is where I get all of my information, and I was like, I will just do a little research,
Sure.
and like, each Wikipedia page for like every Tintin book was like thousands and thousands of words, and it was just like, wow, like
I'm telling you, they're popular.
yeah, yeah,
People have read them.
Yeah.
We have never read them. Well, so something that I didn't tell you guys before we went into Red Rackham's Treasure, which is the volume that we read, is that it is actually the second part. A lot of the Tintin stories were like 2-book long stories where each book could be a standalone story, but they could create a bigger plot if you read the both of them. I actually read Red Rackham's Treasure like a million times before I read the previous book, The Secret of the Unicorn. But now, Nick, since you have all of them, you can now read the prequel. So in The Secret of the Unicorn, Tintin and his captain bestie, Captain Haddock, are finding a map that will lead them to a treasure. And for the functions of plot, that's all you really need to know going into Red Rackham's Treasure, which is handily explained to us within the first page through some nice exposition framing of two sea dogs chatting in a bar and being overheard by a reporter. So we go off on our journey, and as a child reading this, obviously one of the most delightful visual elements of this story is that they explore the sunken wreck of the ship holding this treasure, allegedly, using a submarine that is shaped like a shark so that they can blend in with the sharks.
It was kind of awkward, I'll admit, Kara, to be reading a book about, for a moment there, not knowing where a submarine has been lost with dwindling oxygen supplies in 2023. That was kind of a where have I seen this before moment.
Timely. We'll call it timely.
A timely read. But this time reading through, because it has been a little while since I've read the book, I was most struck by the beautiful scene setting. Like there were a bunch of like larger, almost full page establishing shots where you saw, okay, now we're at the wreck, and so we're going to show like a full intricate detailing of the wreck. Or okay, now we're walking through the jungle, so like we're having an almost full page, we're walking through the jungle illustration. And that's kind of where you can see the detail in Hergé's work. And this wasn't on display as much in this story just because they were underwater most of the time and not on land. But anytime there's a mechanical thing of like any cars, boats, planes, trains, automobiles, Hergé puts a lot of detail into those illustrations.
Yeah, you could see that with when they went to Calculus's laboratory and just all these different shots of all of his inventions and his machinery and the clothes washing machine and I'm trying to remember some of the other things he had in there, but it was like a very like there were so many different little things in the background that you could sort of just rest your eyes on and be like, oh, what's this thing? What's this thing? It was like very detail laden and yeah, I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. And did knowing that this book is aimed for children, but you could read it at any age, what did we think of the characters, gang?
I think Brian and I had the same big hurdle as far as the characters go. I'll let Brian get into it, but
yeah, I mean the first thing I noticed is like alcoholism really just used to be a joke.
Yes.
Like the captain and his hilarious like desperate need for liquor at all times.
his poor doctor, right? Like his doctor's like really looking out for him. Like I was like, this poor guy really cares, and he like sends him a note, and he's like, I gotta get this note to him before he goes off to sea. And it's like, buddy, you gotta ease up.
Like it says in the note, like your liver is trash. Please cease all alcohol consumption right now.
And then he bothers in like parentheticals to like list out everything that contains alcohol just to cover all the bases.
Yeah, just to not leave any wiggle room for our intoxicated friend, the captain. But it was Cuthbert Calculus that really stuck out to me.
I mean, kids love repetition, right? Like, obviously, I'm sure that's part of it. Like, if you have a joke and the kid gets it, you pound it into the ground at least a little because, yeah.
And with Cuthbert Calculus, the joke is he's deaf.
Yeah.
Which is, again, like something that used to be joked about a lot back in the days. And now we recognize is, not really a thing to joke about. But it was just like so infuriating. Every page had at least one panel where like someone is trying to communicate something to him, and he's just like fully not getting it, and then just carrying on. I'm just like, at what point do you just sit this man down with a book and write down what you're trying to say to him?
And they do that. At one point, Captain Haddock like goes to write on the wall of the street. Yeah. Like, we are not interested in your shark submarine, which is insane. You're always interested in a shark submarine. Let's not mess around here.
And of course, Calculus doesn't listen to that because he needed to test a shark submarine so he could sell the patent. So he had his own machinations going on.
And then, despite, the less than warm welcome he receives, I just continued to be delighted at the end of the story where, spoilers, but Captain Haddock realizes that his family's like ancestral estate is going up for sale, and he's like, okay, well, I'm broke, so it's irrelevant. And Calculus is like, Captain, look, your family estate, let's go buy it. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I sold the submarine patent, of course let's go buy your estate. And I'm just like, that, you know what, okay, let's go buy the estate. Like, as a kid, I think that was like less of an impactful moment because I'm like, of course your friend is going to help you buy your estate. But now that but then this time reading this as an adult, I was like, sir, you cannot afford the real estate taxes on this acquisition. So
Yeah,
put a
that was
little bit of
very
a
much
damper on it.
ooh, yeah.
The most outlandish fantasy presented in this book: buying property on a whim.
No, not even you buying property on a whim. Your
Right.
friend buying property on a whim for you.
For you. Yeah.
And then not expecting any share of the profits that are recouped. Like, they walk into this house and it's like chock full of pilfered antiques that the cops have not found, taken, cataloged. So I'm like, okay, well, right there, you've paid back the cost of the house with all these abandoned illegal antiques just lying around. Like, you could just resell those guys.
I mean, one interesting thing I noticed about Tintin, and it wasn't in this book, but it was in Tintin in America, and I thought it was interesting because it was definitely I don't remember this being the case when I read Tintin as a child. Or also it's a reflection on the 1930s. It could be both, but I guess I had always envisioned Tintin as like, oh, he's like this young journalist, and it's kind of like this idea that the pen is mightier than the sword, and he's going to go around and right these wrongs with the power of his words and thoughts, and maybe that was my weird idealized state. And by like page 4 of Tintin in America, he's packing heat, and I was like, what?
Well, that's Tintin in America.
Tintin is a reporter in the same way that Indiana Jones is an archaeologist. It's just an excuse to get you to an exotic locale and have a weapon with you to punch a Nazi.
And like I kept going, and I think like he pulls a gun on at least 5 different people in this book, and I was like, this is a little odd, but also again, I think it's also just sort of like these days you would probably never have that like in a children's book. And of course, in the 1930s, like, I mean, I've read some of them. I think you probably have as well, Kara, like some of the 1930s Disney comics from the time, like Mickey Mouse was running around with a revolver at certain points. And so I was like, okay, like
Batman
this
shot
is
people
like,
on his first few appearances. That whole no killing thing didn't manifest till much later.
Right. So I think it was just me like having that like moment in my mind of like, this is a book for children and they can't, these people, can't be running around with guns. But yeah, that was a surprise. That was I don't think he actually ended up shooting anyone. Like there's a line he just that Tintin won't cross. Maybe I just haven't gotten to the the other ones,
the brutal murders of Tintin.
Right, the escalation. Yeah. It's Tintin in Training Day. Yeah.
Tintin in the clock tower.
Oh my god.
Oh god.
Okay, so Nick, you're obviously going to read some more since you have now financially committed to reading some more. Brian, would you consider reading more Tintin, or is that a big no from you, dog?
I think I'm probably good, right? But by no means that I like hate this experience. I wasn't like reading this book like, God, I can't wait for this to be over. But it also just didn't really do anything for me. I think I left with more questions than I came with. Like,
that's fair.
Who the fuck are Thompson and Thompson?
They just like
there. Show up randomly and then are on the boat as crew members and then are farmers at the end.
Well, I think the book, they intimated this, but correct me if I'm wrong, Kara, they don't say this because obviously it's like book 18 or whatever, but they're both detectives and or police, right? They're police. Yeah.
Much in the way that Tintin is a loose definition of a reporter, Thompson and Thompson are loose definitions of detectives. I enjoy that they are wearing bowler hats because I don't know, it's just they have like such a distinct style. I will also note that their original French names are not Thompson and Thompson, but Dupont et Dupont. It just
I was gonna say, which is it the same situation where it's obviously pronounced the same, but the spelling is different,
correct.
or was this different? Okay, so
Yeah,
they
yeah.
well, that's kind of what I was gonna get at. The one thing that I found really interesting, right, was that this book has a lot of wordplay. It has a lot of dealings with puns and spelling and misunderstandings of what one person says and other person interprets differently. And I was like, is this a really really good English translation? Is like, was there an effort to carry over and localize a lot of these things, or were they just brought in with the localization?
I definitely think there was some localized choices, like translating Captain Haddock's insults alone
Mm,
probably was a
mm,
team effort. I was always a fan of billions of blue blistering barnacles as an epithet. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
but there's definitely some words in his insults where I'm just like, I just glazed over that as a kid, but I kind of want to Google that now because those are definitely not words in my vocabulary.
Right, right. But that was the one thing I was like, if I had any sort of understanding of French, I would be super curious to see what was changed and altered and tweaked. Not only when it was localized at the time,
Hmm.
but I assume probably maybe some of it has been retooled over the years. It's just a guess on my part, but
That's definitely a question. I think besides the absolute minstrel interpretation of the one black character in the entire book that shows up for just a corner of a panel, the
right.
other oh look, brown people are not like white people moment was when they were like on this tropical island and they see some human remains, just the skulls and the
Right.
bones picked clean by time and the sun, and their first thought was like, ah, yes, cannibals. I was like,
They must be cannibals.
wait,
Okay,
wait.
why? How did we leap to this? Like, this is. Let's unpack this because this does not seem okay.
Mm.
Um,
They come standard with every tropical island back in those days. I don't know what to
right.
tell you.
Well, I was also interested to see the prevalence of the sharks as a danger because I think at least in America, the understanding of sharks as a threat, which was statistically false and narratively overblown, is all because of the film Jaws. But so
Oh
reading
yeah.
this, it was interesting to see like, oh no, anti-shark propaganda has a long and varied history. It wasn't just Jaws.
Yeah, like the author definitely has it out for animals. Like I thought about this. Like you've got the sharks, right? And
Hmm.
you've got these annoying parrots that the captain definitely wants to murder. And then I just appreciated or found it shocking that Hellboy's that monkey's got a gun moment was
Mm.
not the first that monkey's got a gun moment.
Mm.
And these monkeys were teaming up too. Like one of
Yeah.
them was holding the stock of the rifle, one was supporting the barrel. Like,
Yeah, it was a real fire team effort of monkeys. But yeah, I appreciated that
So Nick, are you
a
gonna read
lot.
them in order, or are you gonna pick and choose?
Gosh, that's a really tough one for me because there definitely are a couple that really look super interesting. Wikipedia noted, obviously, and as you got it as well, that there's a pretty insane amount of research that went into a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these for what are children's
Yep.
books, in terms of. I mean, obviously, Herja didn't get everything
Uh
right,
huh.
clearly, and there are some. How should we blanket statement this? Problematic cultural sensitivities here and there,
mm.
but and maybe this is why I want to read this book first. Apparently, he did a ton of research, and I think even talked to some space scientists for Tintin Goes to the Moon,
Mm-hmm.
where hopefully he cannot be racist. I'm hoping, or 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 he can, and I'm just interested to see about that. But that was one that it sounded like there was a lot of research that went into it, and that one looked super fun. So there's a few that I think I might want to try first, and then there's a couple where I just look at the titles and I'm like, I think this one could go to some uncomfortable places, and
mm.
yeah, yeah. So
I have every confidence that they can cram some kind of horrifying stereotype into Tintin Goes to the Moon.
Goes to the Moon.
I mean, you're gonna find out. One
Yeah.
that I haven't read in a while that I thought about recommending for us, but then I was like, I don't have the time to read this and see if it holds up to my memory. I remember Tintin in Tibet being not as problematic, but that said, I haven't read it since I was a child, so very, very, very real possibility that I'm just misremembering. But like that's one of the books where Tintin gets like a local buddy for his adventure, and that person is, as far as I remember, not a caricature, like is an actual character instead. So anyways, next episode you can read that one and tell me how wrong I am.
Yeah, I can't wait to read the one about the moon and report back next time that we were all
horribly wrong.
Very wrong.
Oh man. Well, again, I super, super, super appreciate you guys reading along with me on this one. It was a delightful easing back in from our summer break, and a nice nostalgia moment for me. So I do appreciate all this. For all our lovely listeners, please join us for next week's episode, where Paul, Kate, and Kate will be talking about nonfiction comics, some of their favorites, and some recommendations. You can check out the I Read Comic Books podcast on Instagram, TikTok, Discord, Goodreads, new on YouTube, and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Infinity Shred is the best. They do our music. Zander will send shivers down your spine, but as a little treat. Thank you for listening, and until next time, comics are good, and so are you. I'm gonna kill Mike for that Xander sign off. That was like borderline creepy.
We're gonna have to go to HR with that one.